that oak tree will fall over, and finally they'll get enough sunlight, and they'll be loaded with these little blueberries. They're about half the size of a cultivated blueberry, but they have the same amount of flavor, so it's a better tasting berry in my opinion. And shirt's full, right? Especially with the kids, we've got a shirt full of berries and trying to get home. But you can take about 20 minutes once you know what you're doing and craft one of these baskets on the spot to take home a harvest. And that's kind of how I was traditionally introduced to these baskets. They were made for berry picking. They were crafted on the spot. I imagine that this bark has been used for containers for thousands of years, since the very beginning, whenever that was. But there's no great historical reference of a Native American basket like this, right? We don't have this evidence that the Native Americans, in fact, I've not found one single reference that the Native Americans made a basket in this style. But I feel confident that they did, in other styles as well. The reason we don't have the evidence is because these baskets don't last very long outdoors, right? If you leave this sitting outside, it's going to go back to the earth, it's going to decompose in less than a year. It won't be usable, and there'll be very little trace of it left. So there's not a big historical reference here. But what we do have in photos from the 1800s and so forth are many folks in this area making this style of baskets with the same materials we're using today for harvesting different goods in nature. So that's kind of the concept here, is a simple and quick basket that will get the job done. This was definitely not my first basket. This is one of my biggest, and I've used it in a backpack for primitive courses, especially with kids, for over 2 years now. So they do last a while if you take care of them, if you keep them inside. But once again, if you leave this outside or if it gets wet, it's going to become flexible, and it's going to, if you ever needed to reshape it, you could moisten it and you'll be able to reshape it, but eventually it's just going to completely break down. So I sold these for a couple years ago at the farmer's market in Ellijay, and they were quite popular. Though, stuff about this size is kind of maybe just pushed away to decor at this point, right? Something that looks cool in the house and may not have a lot of practicality. And the shape of the basket is going to matter. I want to talk about that, but let's first introduce the plants that we're going to be using, because they're very common to this area, and I like to use common plants. These are things that people are cutting down anyways, or they're clearing out land, whatever, and mostly just going to waste in my mind, or at least they're just being cut and left to decompose where they were living. So to not only do you learn how to make a basket, you get a basket out of it, but connecting with these plants on a deeper level, I truly believe is a good thing for anyone, and it's going to further those primitive skills. Like, this is a good base, even if you're like, well, how does this apply to, like for me, a lot of people come up and they're like wanting to know how to survive in the woods or what they can eat, what's going to keep them safe. Well, this is an excellent craft to get into all sorts of bushcraft, woodworking, and other type things, because there's really no material like working with bark. So it's really interesting to get your hands on it. And if you're anything like me, it's like just a creative person who likes woodworking and metalworking, leatherworking, all that. You'll get all kinds of ideas will come to you once you start feeling of this bark. It's a really cool material. And does everybody know the tulip poplar? There's a tree that has a leaf like this. And it's pretty much, as far as I know, it's the only tree in the forest that if you follow this mid-rib vein, the middle vein here, you follow it up to the top of the leaf, it ends in a notch or a V. Every other leaf ends in a point. Now even oak leaves, they have lobes and things like that, but that mid-rib vein will go to a point on one of those lobes. It doesn't end in a notch or a V. So that makes this tree fairly easy to recognize. It's a pretty unique leaf shape. The first thing this tree gives you value for, that's really easy to take advantage of, is a second little basket. I didn't exactly, plan on remember this, but it's real simple. We're going to take this leaf, we're going to fold these up just like that. I'm going to pierce it on both sides, the same deal. I first kind of came across this in a story about a Native American. It was a woman picking wild strawberries, right? Somebody ever seen wild strawberries or eaten them? They're out right now. This is the time, right? So be checking checking for those wild strawberries, and if you're out there and you happen to find a bunch, you could just grab a tulip leaf, and it gives you a little something extra, right? If you got kids around, just make a really nice hat too. So anyway, so even something as simple as that, and you might think, well, that's kind of good, but I picked these tulip leaves, and they were able to hold 5 times as many little pebbles as I could hold my hand in one tulip leaf, and then I can set it down and I can go back for more, right? You can start accumulating that. I've been in the middle of a blackberry patch with my little girl, and we were both stuck in the middle of this blackberry patch, up to things, and our shirts were full. And it just so happens a tulip sapling was coming right through it, and the young saplings particularly have large leaves. They're trying to soak up a lot of that sunlight. A big mature tree, the leaves are way up there, and they're kind of small overall, but those young saplings produce these large leaves, and I was able to snag that leaf, and I've started handing these baskets full of berries out, right? We were able to make it home with a lot more of those berries than just falling out of our shirts. So a lot of practicality, comes with learning these trees, but the tulip poplar is the main part of our basket. And so I've already done a lot of the work by cutting these into usable segments. And this was two different trees. And you'll notice there are some different sizes here. And I think I've explained this to some of y'all, but whatever the diameter of your log is, your basket opening is going to be twice that big. So you kind of get an idea. There are some bigger logs here. If you're feeling particularly crafty and good with your hands, maybe go for the thicker bark. If you're kind of curious about it and just want to get some practice in, maybe go for something thinner and smaller. It's a little easier to work with. But you're going to end up with something twice the size of the log and half the depth, right? Because ultimately, I didn't bring one in progress, but we're folding it in half, right? So twice the diameter, half the depth is what our basket's going to end up. And I kind of said, for a gift for the wife or something like that, you need to do some dried flowers or something, hang this on the wall. Those long skinny ones were really popular at the farmer's market. But if you're actually wanting to collect, mushrooms or berries in it, a short fat one with a neckband that holds it right here, you have both hands available, and you're just dropping stuff in your basket and rolling with it. So you can pick any of these logs. It doesn't matter to me, but they will be a little bit different. Everything's going to be unique in that sense. Tulip poplar was also has been called things like canoe wood. It's a great soft hardwood, right? So it's pretty good for carving, and it's kind of cool. The blanks, almost you could say, that are left over after you peel the bark really get your mind turning for woodworking because it's so slick and almost already like a sanded finished product just underneath the bark there. But they would fell large tulip poplar trees onto logs, right? Because if you just drop it on the ground, that bottom's going to start rotting, especially a tulip poplar. It'll rot really, really quickly. So they would drop it up on logs. And how were the Native Americans dropping trees this big? That's a task. It's a task for an axe or a crosscut saw, but they didn't have either of those, right?
Did they burn them the year before?
Stripping the bark and killing them? Yeah, maybe so. They were definitely using fire. So they were carving. Fire was their knife, right, for carving wood. So they would burn this tree down, maybe dead, maybe not. I'm not sure on that fact. They would burn this tree down. It would land right on their logs, and then they would start to burn down in their canoe, right? They would build a big fire, set their coals up there, and you can use straws or blow tubes and help force that heat down into the wood. And once you get that cavern started, it starts to go really quickly. You just burn out your little canoe there. So a lot of use for tulip poplar. It's not one of those trees that we're eating much off of, though. Everybody asks you, can you eat it? It's like this is one that in large quantities would be toxic. So we're not going to put any part of this tree in our mouth. Any questions on tulip poplar? The last thing is it's in the magnolia family. So I just want to differentiate. I wouldn't call it a poplar tree, even though that definitely gets spoken around here. You'll hear yellow poplar, tulip poplar. Do we hear anything else? That's the only two names we've heard it called, yellow poplar, tulip poplar.
So what do they sell at Home Depot?
This is a native tree, so I wouldn't consider it invasive, but it has a quick growing tendency.
Does it sprout out so other trees come up from it?
Yeah, it'll spread in that manner.
So what do they sell at Home Depot?
And they're calling it a tulip tree?
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying it's poplar.
Oh, they're calling it poplar? That'd be a good question. So we have some